How many of you guys in the room struggled with maths growing up? Raise your hands. Fair few. Well, keep your hands raised if you also had difficulty with sports growing up, and sometimes people around you called you clumsy. There's got to be a few of you in the room. Oh, there we go, some people. Don't worry, I'm not going to put you on the spot. Well, here's the thing. These are some of the signs that can be detected when we're looking out for a learning difficulty that's commonly diagnosed as dyspraxia. Now, dyspraxia is technically defined as the brain's difficulty in transmitting motor signals to the rest of the body. And how that can manifest itself in children and in adults is, for example, a child has difficulty in throwing and catching the ball. The child says lello instead of yellow. They find it very difficult to cut with scissors and in a straight line. And as time goes on, their handwriting becomes quite illegible, and they start suffering really with things like sports and maths and science. And often, all of these things are so overwhelming in childhood that they start having a lot of restless nights, a lot of insomnia. And of course, a fear of fitting in with their classmates. And here's the other thing about children who have dyspraxia. And in case you haven't figured it out yet, I'm one of those people. The thing is that they can often have overlaps with other learning difficulties like dyslexia and ADHD. And the thing about these people and us is that essentially our brains are wired very differently. We look at the world around us in a completely different way, and we process those signals in a very innovative way. And that often leads to sort of innovations in process of finding solutions, which then manifests its way in the sense that we basically come up with very unique ideas that other people may not necessarily have the capabilities to do. And so when I look back at my childhood, a lot of these signs that I talked about did manifest in those ways. For example, I was very good at English and history. But subjects like maths and physics and chemistry were just almost impossible for me. On top of this, I was a very awkward and geeky, introverted tomboy. And I was actually placed in a very highly academically ranked school in England, where the expectations were nothing but A stars, not even A's. And so, that led to me kind of being bullied because I didn't really fit in with my surroundings, being this kind of tomboy and introvert. But B, the teachers they really didn't understand me. They almost made me feel like I was doing these things on purpose. They couldn't understand, how could you be here in this school and perform so below average in certain subjects, yet excel in other areas? And so my parents were often called in, and they were being told, why is this child doing this? And instead of actually trying to nurture and fulfill and understand my brain and try and make it reach its full potential. And so aged 15, my teacher said to me, look, we think that you could really benefit from some extra time in exams. So why don't you go and see an educational psychologist and see if there's anything that you can get so you can get that extra time? And so off I went to the educational psychologist. And it was there that she told me that, you've got dyspraxia. She did all the tests. And I'd never even heard about this thing before. So, of course, I was a little bit confused. But then I understood that this was why I was a little bit out of sync with my environment. And it was there that she told me something that I'll never forget. And she told me that for 15 years, I had been hacking and rewiring my brain to keep up with this incredibly intense educational system. And the two ways, in almost juxtaposition, that I was doing this was through music and through sports. So when we think about sports, and I look back at my journey with sports, I wasn't really very good at many of them in the beginning. But the sport that I really gravitated myself towards was Formula One. My grandfather was a massive petrol head. We loved watching Formula One on Sundays. It was our bonding thing. And the thing about racing, though, is that it's not really something most of us get to experience. That's because if we look at Formula One in itself, there's only 800 drivers in history that have actually ever participated in a F1 race. And so being this kind of geek and retro child in the 90s, growing up in the 90s, the way I really experienced motorsport was through gaming. So the games that I really loved were Gran Turismo, Mario Kart, and a motorbike game called Road Rash. And I literally spent thousands of hours after school just playing these games. And of course, in a way, it was a form of escaping some of the bullying and things. When I was 13, 2 years before I got diagnosed, I got into a go-kart. And I'll always remember that moment. It was one of the most powerful and defining moments of my life because A, I felt this incredible adrenaline, but B, once I put that helmet on, nobody around me knew who I was. It was just me, the track, and the go-kart. And so I just felt completely liberated and exhilarated, and all I wanted to do now was just shave nanoseconds off my lap time. So when I got this diagnosis of having dyspraxia, of course, I told you I felt upset, but really I felt utterly heartbroken because in the beginning, yes, it felt disjointed a little bit going go-karting, but I put that down to it being a new skill, a new environment, not because there was anything else going on in my body. At that moment, I thought I'd really started finding and figuring out my life's purpose. So when this happened, I was like, oh God, well, I mean, that's just thrown everything into question now. And so what am I going to do? And in the beginning, I really just sort of retreated into my gaming shell. And the educational psychologist told my mum, look, she's got to hang up her racing shoes, and she's got to focus now on overcoming some of these difficult learning difficulties that she has, because she has to get the best grades that she can do now for her GCSEs. And so during that intense period of studying, I realized two things. One was that I really thrived on performing under pressure. And secondly, I loved proving people wrong because of everything I'd experienced as a child. And so I started asking myself this question, how had I been rewiring my brain unconsciously? And the more I started to think about it, the more I realized it was really the fundamental blocks that were absolutely key to understanding and being able to progress to the next level. And if I didn't understand those core concepts in math and whatever it was, I wouldn't be able to get to the next point. So for me, that meant really breaking everything down into manageable, bite-sized chunks. And I'm really, really lucky to have amazing parents who sacrificed absolutely everything to make sure that they could support my dreams and that I could have as much one-to-one tuition as possible. And for children who have learning disabilities, I do believe that that's definitely a big way in helping them overcome some of these things. And so with those tutors together, we came up with the whole color coding things and mind mapping processes to help my brain. And we also started incorporating more sports into my life. So apart from racing, there was swimming and tennis. And I started actually learning those things that I had difficulties with, like balance and coordination, but in a different way. And it was actually in a tennis lesson that my coach said to me, well, hang on a minute, you're actually not looking at the ball when it's coming to you, and that's why you're missing all of the shots. And it literally just took that one small detection for my game to just completely change. And some of the other things that also helped me during that period, and still to this day even, was yoga, meditation, absolutely helped in calming down this mind that's in its own shape or form goes at 1,000 miles an hour, but also helped me realize the importance of repetitive and progressive practice. That's what helps you make progress and get those kind of joining dots much more aligned. So when I think about music then, it's absolutely one of the most powerful healing forces in the world. I think we all know that. And my first experience of that really was in primary school where I was getting bullied, and I was 7 years old, and I was basically learning the guitar. And escaping class to go and learn this guitar with this teacher was just some of the most magical memories of my childhood. And then again, suddenly, I went to high school, and it just felt really disjointed, being in music class. And part of this was because creativity just wasn't really encouraged in a school where it was literally all about getting A stars. The music department was much more underfunded than the other departments. And because we're a group of very mixed abilities, you've got some people who are grade 8, some people who've never played an instrument, the focus was much more on those kids who are going to take that subject on for GCSEs. And so it kind of it felt to me like I was almost being trapped into, getting educated out of creativity. And actually that the really fundamental important things about music, about its healing, abilities and the power of it, that wasn't being taught properly. And it just really felt like we were there to just tick a box. And so I became that kid, who put on their headphones and just wanted to escape the world. And at this point, we're now in the millennium age, year 2000. of course, the iPod has just started coming out, and there's the insurgence of the internet. And that really brought along two things. Number one, the world is completely different to these four walls that have been built around me. And it's an amazing world. And number two, there's this thing called house music. I became obsessed with house music. It literally was my be-all and end-all, just discovering new sounds, putting them on my iPod, creating these digital playlists, and suddenly I became the cool kid. Everybody wanted to know what this eclectic thing was that I was collecting that they'd never heard of before. And growing up in London, I was very lucky to start going out to clubs. And that's where I really experienced the powers of house music on the dance floor. On this dance floor, there's just no judgment. It's just literally about experiencing energy on the same frequencies that's coming out of the speakers. And it's just about you and your release of energy at that moment in time. And you're meeting people from all different walks of life. So naturally, I started gravitating towards the DJ booth. I became so curious as to who are these guys and girls, and how can I become friends with them? And eventually, I started learning from them, and they started letting me observe their environment. And quite quickly, I was, saying to myself, I've just got to learn how to DJ now. I've just got to share these sounds I have to the other people that I know. And that's what I did. I learned how to DJ, and over the course of 10 years, I've learned how to produce music. I've become a music journalist. And how that's related to my journey with dyspraxia is actually really amazing, because it's literally transformed some of my weaknesses, such as public speaking and writing and some of these things, and made them into a strength. And there's really two ways that it's done that. And first is the internal pressures, of course. There are no hacks to that. If you're going to be learning or mastering an instrument, or you're going to think about producing music or DJing, it's hard work. And you've just got to be prepared to roll up your sleeves, no matter who you are. But for a brain like mine, it will take 3 to 5 times more work and energy to get my mind and brain into sync with a beat around me. So actually with that was the fact that I've spent more than 10,000 hours actually devoting my time to music in some shape or form. And that's then led to discovering things like binaural beats, which allowed me to basically, play that when I'm studying and significantly improve the processing power of my brain capacity. The other thing, the external pressures, I think for anybody who's pursuing a career in music, will always be one of the most toughest and ambiguous things a human being can do. My personal feeling on it is, as a female, you're absolutely undervalued, you're constantly judged, and you're scrutinized. It doesn't matter, who you are, how great you are, whatever. That's always going to be something that just continues with social media and everything. And secondly, then, that the people who run the industries, there is the common themes of materialism, drug taking, alcohol abuse, and then having to navigate that on a professional level. I found that very, very tough. And then many times where I asked myself, well, why am I doing this? I'm also getting now health problems, back problems, all of these things from traveling. And the reason why I do what I do in music is because every single time you go into that room, you're able to basically just take that room into a hypnosis state where you're not even saying anything, but you're moving people into a completely different dimension, and you're just transcending their journey. If you're lucky, you're changing their life in some shape or form. And that has always been the common theme, that I've experienced from even just sharing those playlists on my iPod to, DJing in different places. And so the message I'd really like to share in conclusion to this is that only you and you alone can define your own success, your barriers, and your hurdles, and not your family, not your friends, not your teachers. So you have to be, guided by your intuition, no matter how unnatural it may seem. You have to go out of your comfort zone, because if you don't, you'll just remain at the back of the pack. You won't live life to the fullest potential that you can really be. You have to be inspired. You have to get out there and lead your imagination to all of the peaks. And that's how your dreams will manifest even faster than you thought they could be. And often, what tends to happen is that dream becomes even better than what you initially dreamed for. And for me, personally, yes, that's music, but I had a dream of being a Formula One driver, and I wasn't able to go and become that F1 driver. But what I was able to do through sheer determination was stay on that racetrack. And I started observing the mindset of a successful driver. And it's like any successful athlete. It's a lot of things. It's nutrition, it's fitness, it's mental resilience. And all of those things combined can lead to better leaders in business and in life. And that's a company I'm running today, exploring those themes. So in conclusion, I'd love to perform a little track that I've written called Code 13. And it's about numerology, planetary frequencies, and most importantly, my journey towards consciousness on planet Earth. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks.